$28.5 trillion. I want you to just sit with that number for a second. 28.5 trillion.
It's a number so large it almost defies human comprehension, honestly.
Right. I mean, if you took the entire gross domestic product of the United States,
Every car sold, every app developed.
exactly every cup of coffee bought,
Huh.
and then you added the combined GDP of every single country in Europe, you would still fall short of $28.5 trillion.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But according to a highly anticipated upcoming S1 filing from SpaceX, that staggering number is their claimed total addressable market, or TAM.
And when valuations get that inflated, they stop acting like data points.
Yeah.
Yeah, they start operating almost like gravity, pulling the entire market's sense of reality right into their orbit.
Well, welcome to today's Deep Dives. We're looking at a brilliantly argued piece by Andrew Colton titled The Orbital Illusion: Physics, Finance, and the Space Hype.
It's such a great read.
It really is. And our mission today is to help you, the listener, separate a genuinely compelling long-term civilizational vision from, well, near-term investment reality.
Because there's a massive difference between the two.
Absolutely. And specifically, we are going to tear down the wildly seductive, totally science fiction-sounding pitch that has been caught up in this massive gravitational pull.
Ah, yes. The orbital data center.
The orbital data center. So, okay, let's unpack this because we have to start with that financial reality. We're looking at a $28.5 trillion TAM.
It's a huge number.
It's absurd. On its face, throwing a number that large into an S1 feels, I don't know, incredibly dangerous for everyday retail investors.
What's fascinating here is the underlying motivational strategy, which traces directly back to Elon Musk's historical approach to goal setting.
Oh, right, the impossible deadlines.
Exactly. If you look at his track record, he has this well-documented habit of setting targets that inspire his engineering teams, but which occasionally bear only a passing relationship to eventual reality.
Yeah, Colton points out some great historical examples in the source.
He does. Take Falcon 9 reusability. It was genuinely revolutionary for the aerospace industry, but the timeline was years late.
Right. And full self-driving was promised back in, what, 2016?
Yep, 2016. And here we are in 2025 with systems that still require human supervision.
And Mars colonization by 2024. I mean, the timeline speaks for itself.
It really does.
It's a management technique, right?
Yeah.
You shoot for the absolute impossible so that even when you inevitably miss...
You still land somewhere incredible.
Yeah, and you've pushed your engineers way beyond what they thought were their limits.
And within the walls of a private company, that actually works. When your stakeholders are, venture capitalists and true believers who understand the meta game being played.
They know it's a stretch goal.
Exactly. It's arguably very effective. The danger materializes when the audience shifts to retail investors.
Because an S1 isn't a vision board.
No, it's not. It's supposed to be grounded in rigid financial reality.
So taking global telecommunications, Earth observation, and interplanetary logistics, and just aggregating them all into one single monolithic TAM is...
As the author puts it, aspiration dressed as analysis.
I love that quote. Because a number that large makes literally any company valuation seem reasonable by comparison.
Sure, if the market is $28 trillion, suddenly a $1 trillion valuation looks like a total bargain.
Right. Serious institutional investors usually recognize this trick. But history tells us that retail investors often do not, especially when the narrative is just so compelling.
And it distorts the entire sector. When one company claims a gravitational field that massive, it pulls in dozens of other space startup concepts trying to capture the spillover enthusiasm.
Everyone wants a piece of the space pie.
Exactly. They start pitching ideas that sound incredible in a slide deck, but completely fall apart the second you apply basic physics.
Which brings us perfectly to the orbital data center.
The ultimate slide deck pitch.
Oh, totally. The pitch goes like this, right? AI is driving this unprecedented demand for compute infrastructure here on Earth.
Massive demand.
Right. And we are running out of cheap land, and these massive server farms are just overwhelming our terrestrial power grids.
They're huge energy hogs.
So the pitch says, let's just put the data centers in space.
Makes sense on paper.
You get unlimited solar energy, you get the freezing cold vacuum of space to act as a natural coolant for these incredibly hot AI processors, and you are totally free from land and grid constraints.
It sounds brilliant.
So I'm not going to lie, the first time I read that, it sounded like a slam dunk.
It does sound elegant. I mean, it taps into our intuitive assumptions about space.
That it's freezing cold and constantly bathed in sunlight.
Right. But it completely ignores the unforgiving mechanics of how heat actually transfers.
Okay, yes, the cooling aspect.
Hmm.
Because I was reading the source material and my brain just kind of halted.
It's a tricky concept.
Wait, space is a vacuum. Doesn't a vacuum act like a thermos flask, trapping heat rather than releasing it?
Yes. You've hit on what the author calls the thermal paradox.
The thermal paradox.
Exactly. The very thing that makes space seem like a natural coolant, the vacuum, is precisely what makes cooling a server in orbit extraordinarily difficult.
Because there's no air.
Right. Here on Earth, we cool high-performance electronics primarily through convection. A server generates heat, a massive HVAC system pushes air across the heat sinks.
And the air molecules physically absorb that thermal energy.
And they carry it away.
It's like blowing on a hot cup of soup. The air literally takes the heat with it.
That's a perfect analogy. But in the near-perfect vacuum of low Earth orbit, there is no air. There are no molecules to carry the heat away.
So you have completely lost convection.
Entirely. That means every single joule of thermal energy generated by those massively powerful AI processors.
And a modern GPU rack can pull tens of thousands of watts.
Tens of thousands. All of that heat has to be eliminated purely through radiation. The heat has to literally radiate out into the void as infrared light.
Wow. So you're putting the most heat-intensive technology humanity has ever created inside the ultimate insulated thermos. How do you even get the heat out then?
Well, you need massive, incredibly heavy radiator panel arrays.
Just giant metal panels.
Giant panels. You have to pump a fluid through miles of piping across a huge surface area just to shed the heat into the vacuum.
And when you increase the surface area and add all that metal and fluid, you are adding weight.
And in the launch business, weight is the ultimate enemy.
Obviously.
Yeah.
The cost to launch stuff is astronomical.
Exactly. The cost to get those radiators out of Earth's gravity well destroys the economics before you even power the servers on.
So heat disposal, not power generation, is the single greatest engineering challenge of the entire concept.
Without a doubt.
But, even if you solve the heat, the power generation isn't the free ride it's pitched to be either.
Not at all.
The author talks about the solar illusion, the idea that sunlight in orbit is abundant, uninterrupted, and completely free.
Well, the photons are free. The infrastructure required to harvest those photons and turn them into hyperscale compute power is staggeringly expensive.
Because you can't just take normal solar panels, right?
No, you can't just take the silicon solar panels we use on terrestrial solar farms and bolt them to a satellite. The space environment destroys standard electronics.
So what do you need?
To harvest solar energy at the scale and efficiency required for an orbital data center, you need highly specialized hardware. Specifically, space-grade multi-junction gallium arsenide photovoltaic cells.
Okay, gallium arsenide. Let's dig into that because I know that is not something you just pick up at the local hardware store.
Oh, not at all. These cells have to be engineered with multiple crystalline layers to capture different spectrums of light.
Wow.
And they have to be robust enough to survive atomic oxygen and constant bombardment by micrometeorites.
So they are incredibly bespoke.
Extremely. Because of the bespoke manufacturing process, they are priced at roughly 100 times the cost of terrestrial solar panels.
100 times the cost.
Yeah.
So the CapEx, the capital expenditure just to power the GPUs is astronomical.
If you run the financial model, the upfront cost for the gallium arsenide arrays required to power a hyperscale facility would absolutely dwarf the cost of the AI processors themselves.
That's insane.
The promise of free energy in space is real, but the toll you pay to collect it bankrupts the business model.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let's play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's say you have bottomless pockets.
Infinite money.
Right. You buy the expensive gallium arsenide panels. You engineer the massive thermal radiators, you launch it all, you are immediately running face first into what the author terms the obsolescence trap.
Oh, the obsolescence trap is brutal.
It's this unforgiving timeline discrepancy between the speed of AI development and the speed of aerospace engineering.
The timelines are fundamentally incompatible. AI hardware cycles are relentless.
They really are.
Right now, a new generation of chips drops every 12 to 18 months.
Rendering the previous generation highly inefficient by comparison.
Exactly. But getting a multi-billion-dollar facility into orbit is not a quick weekend software update.
No, I imagine it takes years.
Designing, launching, and commissioning an orbital facility takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years.
Wow.
By the time you freeze your hardware design, build the satellite bus around it, secure a launch vehicle, and get it operational in orbit, years have passed.
It reminds me of the feeling of buying a brand new top-of-the-line smartphone. And literally 2 weeks later, the company announces the next generation.
And suddenly your phone feels completely outdated.
Yeah, but scale that feeling up to a $5 billion space station. Let's look at this 2030 scenario from the source.
It's a great example.
If I start building an orbital data center today in 2025, I have to design it around the absolute best 2024 GPUs currently available.
Right, because that's what exists.
When that facility finally opens its solar arrays in 2030, I am firing up 6-year-old hardware.
While your competitors back down on Earth have cycled through 3 entirely new hardware generations.
So they're crushing you.
They are running inference models at a fraction of your cost per compute. And here is the fatal flaw in the orbital model. You cannot upgrade servers in orbit.
You can't just send an IT tech up in a van with a stack of new graphics cards.
No, you cannot respond to market demands at all. So your depreciation schedule, the financial timeline over which your highly expensive asset loses its value, becomes a cautionary tale.
You have basically spent billions of dollars to launch a museum piece.
That's exactly what it is.
So what does this all mean if something simply breaks? Forget trying to upgrade to the newest fancy chip. What if a cooling fan stops spinning?
Or a solid-state drive fails?
Right. We know that failure rates in massive data centers are a daily reality. Things break all the time.
And the serviceability problem is absolute. On Earth, if a memory stick fails in a server rack, a technician walks down an aisle and swaps it out in 3 minutes.
Easy.
In orbit, a failed component is a permanent write-off.
But wait, I've seen companies pitching robotic servicing, right? Sending up drones to fix things.
People love to talk about robotic servicing. But let's look at the mechanics. We are talking about dense server infrastructure.
Racks packed tightly together to minimize cable length and latency.
Exactly. The intricate, highly delicate robotic systems required to autonomously replace an internal server component inside a dense rack while floating in microgravity.
That sounds impossible.
It basically remains firmly in the realm of theory. And if your data center is positioned higher up, say in geostationary orbit,
Yep.
a human being has literally never performed a spacewalk at geostationary altitude.
Wait, really? Never?
Never. The radiation environment is too harsh, so every single hardware failure permanently degrades the capacity of your data center with zero remedy.
Man, that is bleak. But okay, let me pivot to the data side of things. But what about Starlink? We've seen impressive low-latency satellite internet for consumers.
We have.
I mean, I am literally looking at my Starlink dish out the window right now, and I'm streaming 4K video with practically zero lag. I have to imagine some listeners are thinking the exact same thing. Why doesn't that solve the data bottleneck? We clearly know how to move data to and from space.
It proves we can move consumer-level data, but hyperscale computing for AI inference is a completely different animal.
How so?
This brings us to the fiber gap. Terrestrial fiber optic cables deliver effectively unlimited bandwidth at negligible latency.
That physical glass fiber backbone.
Yes, that is what hyperscale computing depends on. Orbital facilities, however, have to rely on radio frequency or laser links.
And those just aren't big enough pipes. It's like trying to run the entire volume of the New York Stock Exchange through a fast food drive-through intercom.
That's a great way to look at it.
The data pipeline just physically isn't wide enough.
Radio waves and optical lasers cannot match the raw throughput or the reliability of physical glass fiber when you are dealing with hyperscale volumes.
And latency is the real killer, right?
Absolutely. If an autonomous driving network or a financial trading algorithm queries an AI model, a delay of 200 milliseconds is an eternity.
It's too slow.
Way too slow. For AI inference workloads, real-time, low-latency processing is the entire point. Closing the gap between what orbital connectivity can deliver and what hyperscale compute actually requires would demand a dedicated satellite relay infrastructure.
Which would cost a fortune.
Its cost would rival the data center itself.
Which introduces the whole problem of orbital mechanics. Because if you put your data center in low Earth orbit, it's traveling at 17,000 miles an hour.
There. Very fast.
It doesn't just hover above your corporate headquarters.
Right.
Every 90 minutes, your multi-billion-dollar server rack disappears over the horizon, completely severing its direct line of sight to your ground station.
Unless, of course, you build that impossibly expensive relay network of other satellites to bounce the signal around the curvature of the Earth.
Which adds even more latency.
Exactly.
I know the source mentioned sun-synchronous orbits as a potential workaround.
Sun-synchronous orbits are a genuinely clever use of orbital mechanics. By precisely matching the satellite's orbital precession to the Earth's revolution around the sun, you can keep the satellite riding the dawn-dusk Terminator line.
So it effectively stays bathed in sunlight 24/7.
Right. But it's trying to put a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
A Band-Aid on a broken leg. I like that.
Because whether you are in LEO, GEO, or a sun-synchronous orbit, the underlying reality holds firm.
Being in space makes everything harder.
Moving an operation into the vacuum of space makes every single aspect of that operation geometrically harder. The connectivity, the thermal management, the obsolescence, the maintenance.
None of these physics problems disappear just because you found a slightly better orbit.
Precisely.
Every time you try to find a workaround, the laws of physics just step in and say no.
Physics always wins.
Always. And as I was digesting all of this, I realized something else. Even if the tech giant had bottomless pockets,
Even if they decided to burn billions in cash to brute force their way past the thermal paradox and the obsolescence trap.
right, they'd be burning their own corporate values in the process.
Yeah.
There's a glaring environmental contradiction here.
It is perhaps the greatest irony of the entire concept. The companies driving the AI boom, the hyperscalers, the massive tech conglomerates almost universally have incredibly strict net zero emissions pledges.
They are heavily scrutinized by regulators, investors, and the public.
Very heavily. They have to stick to those sustainability commitments.
And rocket launches are pretty much the exact opposite of net zero.
Rocket launches are among the most carbon-intensive events in the modern global economy.
So to build and then maintain a sustained fleet of orbital data centers, you'd require a massive ongoing launch cadence.
Because of the obsolescence and the lack of serviceability we just talked about, you would have to constantly send new rockets up just to replace the servers that break or age out.
It's an endless cycle.
Maintaining that space fleet would instantly obliterate the carbon budgets and sustainability commitments of the very companies you were trying to sell the compute power to.
You are literally trying to solve a terrestrial power grid problem by punching a massive hole in your corporate carbon budget.
It makes absolutely no sense from a public relations or regulatory standpoint.
And even if they didn't care about the carbon, they have to care about the risk. The financial risk of operating in that environment is staggering.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of corporate finance, the environment of space is effectively uninsurable through conventional markets for an asset of this type.
Wow. Uninsurable.
Think about the physical risk profile. You have a rapidly growing field of space debris. In low Earth orbit, a defunct satellite or a stray bolt from an old rocket stage is traveling at orbital speeds.
It's essentially a bullet traveling at 17,000 miles an hour.
Precisely. If that hits your radiator array, it turns your multi-million-dollar cooling system into shrapnel.
Which then cascades into more debris.
A total nightmare. You also have solar weather events, coronal mass ejections that can fry unshielded electronics in an instant.
Just wiped out by the sun.
And then there is the inherent impossibility of physical security. You cannot put a perimeter fence and a security guard around a satellite.
And the data security issue feels like the final nail in the coffin, doesn't it?
It really is. Signals transmitted to and from an orbital facility can be intercepted by any adversary who possesses capable listening assets in orbit.
So you are taking the world's most valuable proprietary AI data and beaming it through a vacuum where anyone with the right antenna can pull it down.
Yep. So to counter that, you have to use incredibly heavy encryption protocols.
But encrypting and decrypting data at hyperscale volumes requires heavy computational overhead.
Which introduces, you guessed it, more latency.
It kills the very low latency AI inference speeds you were trying to achieve in the first place.
It defeats the whole purpose.
So if we look at the whole board, we have the thermal paradox where the vacuum acts like an insulator. We have the staggering cost and manufacturing bottlenecks of gallium arsenide solar panels.
The obsolescence trap where your hardware is 6 years old on day one.
The absolute impossibility of dense rack maintenance. The fiber gap that chokes data throughput, the environmental contradiction of burning rocket fuel to claim green energy, and the fact that it is an uninsurable security nightmare.
It's quite the list.
I think it is time for the bottom line.
The bottom line is that the $28.5 trillion TAM is a civilizational vision aggressively dressed up as a near-term investment thesis.
And I want to be really clear for you listening.
Huh.
None of this is to say that space exploration isn't vital.
Not at all.
SpaceX's achievements in lowering the cost per kilogram to orbit are genuinely extraordinary. The long-term future of human civilization absolutely extends beyond this planet.
But there is a massive, incredibly important difference between a 100-year civilizational vision and a Q3 earnings report.
Exactly.
Orbital data centers are pitched as an elegant solution, but in reality, they take a terrestrial problem and apply the physics of space to make it considerably harder, vastly more expensive, and mathematically unviable.
Physics always wins.
The laws of physics and the brutal realities of hardware depreciation have already rendered their verdict on orbital data centers.
The real test now is whether retail investors will actually read the prospectus
Understand the thermodynamics.
and see past the narrative gravity before getting swept up in the space hype cycle.
That's the real challenge.
It is so incredibly easy to look up at the stars and think all our future solutions are out there waiting for us. But the author of our source material mentioned something at the very end of his piece.
Yeah, the earthbound solution.
He noted that he is currently working on an earthbound solution. And that is the thought I want to leave you with today.
I love that framing.
I want you to look around your own terrestrial environment right now. We had this massive AI power and cooling crisis staring us in the face.
It's happening right now.
So what kind of radical earthbound innovations could we build to solve this right here at home, without having to fight the brutal, unforgiving laws of orbital mechanics?